to season 2 of The Journey Home. We had a lot of fun with season 1. We learnt a lot, there's a lot of trial and error, but we have all this great content that we've come across which we want to present, and we want to present it in a way which is more engaging with the audience. So in this season 2, we're going to take a slightly different approach. We're going to give a little bit more of a personal opinion, a little bit of a dialogue at the beginning, a little bit more talk about the content we're presenting, and try and build as we go on. Hopefully, season after season, it gets a little better. Thank you for all those who have bared with us up until now, and welcome to all the new watchers or first-time watchers today. So today marks a very special day. Today is the 20th of July, and in 1999, July 20th, began what's become known as the persecution of Falun Gong. And we're going to talk about that today because it is such an important topic, one that people might not be aware about at all. People that might be aware about it might only have come in contact with this subject through seeing people on the street who are Falun Dafa practitioners or supporters of Falun Dafa that might be handing out, say, flyers which have a little bit of information about what's going on. You may have seen groups of people meditating around this time, or even holding rallies in major cities. Not so much rallies, more marches, I suppose would be the more correct term for it, in major cities around the world. And these marches include banners, usually a marching band, lots of very colourful and bright uniforms. Obviously the marching band, you're going to hear beating of drums. You're going to see the person at the front of the march that holds the big staff, twirling that around, and it's a bit of a nice scene to sort of look at, really. It's a big, beautiful scene, big display of colour that marches through cities around the world. So they do this around this time every year, and the reason is, well, I guess it's twofold. It's to let people know of Falun Gong and who they are, and but also, many times it's to draw attention to this persecution that is happening today, still today, unfortunately, after 23 long years. So the purpose of today's episode, which is marks episode 1 of season 2, is to talk about this a bit further, to look at some publications or some main sources, find out where you can get a bit more information, and I'll talk a little bit about my understanding about how this all began. There's a little bit of misunderstanding around why it began and why is it still going, and so we're going to sort of look into those aspects from my perspective and from these other sources that are probably the authority on the subject, and then sort of, I guess, other sources on the periphery. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you. Welcome to The Journey Home, and thank you for joining me. Many cultures and belief systems around the world believe that returning to the heavens is the true meaning of life. But how do we get there? Through spiritual refinement, by following a set of guiding principles, and by achieving spiritual perfection. In this series, we follow Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, whose set of guiding principles are Jin, Shan, Ren, or in English, truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Thank you for joining me. So today, as I discussed in our introduction, is a special day. It's a special day for all the wrong reasons, because today is a day that signifies the ongoing persecution of this spiritual group that we're following in this series, Falun Dafa or Falun Gong. This persecution began officially in July 1999, and if I'm sharing from my understanding, it began by the Communist Party secretary head, whose name is Jiang, Zemin, who obviously was a few secretaries ago. Now we have Xi Jinping in that head position, and there was one in between whose name escapes me, but it was during Jiang Zemin's time that the persecution began. And Jiang Zemin himself is a character with a very colourful history. So most of the viewers here would be aware of the Tiananmen Square massacre, which I believe was 1969. The viewers can correct me if I'm wrong there. But during that time, there was a big swell of support for more of a democratic society. You had a lot of university students and teachers and the public gathering together, calling for this change. And what followed it was a series of events that have become well known around the world as the Tiananmen Square massacre. And there's a famous picture of a man, unknown man, standing in front of a tank, stopping the tanks in its tracks, literally. Couldn't go past him, it just stopped there. Someone had taken his photo, this man in a white shirt, from what I remember, was just standing there, maybe with a shopping bag, and he's just stopped this big armored tank from going forward. Why do I bring this up? Well, it was during this time when Jiang Zemin was the one who had issued the orders, I believe, for part of that massacre to escalate when no other officials would. I believe that's how he earned his reputation and his power through this period of time. It may have been the tanks going in, it might have been the open fire on the unarmed civilians. It was his involvement in that which propelled him to the position that he ultimately held, up until he was pushed out, I suppose, later on, but he rose to the top of the Chinese Communist Party. So it gives you a bit of an insight into who this person is. It's somebody that's definitely didn't want to see a peaceful solution in this situation that was unfolding. He was a person that would see an opportunity to propel himself forward within the Communist Party system, an opportunity to grab power, cement wealth and fortune for his family and his friends by doing so, and so that's history now. Obviously, that event has been mischaracterized in itself inside mainland China, of course. There's a lot of propaganda that goes on to talk about how the students had killed so many officers and so forth, but you can look into the history of that yourselves and see that those accounts really, they're not based in fact, and it's quite the opposite. I mean, the claims are that unarmed students murdered some huge number of trained armed police. I mean, it doesn't sound plausible. Anyway, I digress. Today, we're focusing on the persecution of Falun Gong, and the reason it's important to understand the history of this character, Jiang is that he's the one who single-handedly decided to initiate this persecution against Falun Gong. So to understand why that may be, I'll give you a little bit of an insight into Falun Gong's beginnings from my perspective and from what I've learnt over the years. And I've learnt this from following the practice, following the guiding principles, learning about the system, and also contact with those that have fled China, that have been personally persecuted, that have had family members persecuted, going to events, speaking to government members, reporters and investigative journalists. So sort of got I formed a bit of an idea of how this all began. But back in China in 1992, the founder of Falun Gong, his name is Li Hongzhi, and Li Hongzhi came out to the public with the teachings that he had enlightened to. Now, he did this through word of mouth in a 2-year period where he traveled all around China, and he would travel very meagerly. I think it wasn't private jets flying him around. He was staying in grand hotels. There wasn't grand advertising campaigns. It was meager travel. Practitioners of the practice would pick him up in different cities, drive him around. He'd travel economy class and go on boats, and he'd eat stories about him eating tuna noodles and being very generous with his time, and sometimes traveling to give 2 lectures a day, which could go on for a couple of hours each time, and waiting around for photographs, and never complaining, of course, and demonstrating the characters that he taught and the virtues that he was teaching. And I think that's what really struck with people who were attending these classes. But over this 2-year period of word of mouth and traveling around, this practice became immensely popular, and the popularity just only grew. And there was a time when the Li Hongzhi, the founder, and the Falun Gong Association were working alongside with the Qigong Chinese Research Society, which was a society set up in China to look into Qigong practices. There were many of them in China at the time. Qigong is 2 words, Qi and Gong, which are just 2 types of energy. Basically, everyone has Qi in their body. When you actually practice spiritual cultivation, what you do is sort of Qi is only used as a primary stage to purify the body, and then you have Gong that comes out, which is really the fundamental, the energy that makes all changes possible, and the higher sort of energy. So these 2 words came out of around the time of the Cultural Revolution, which is another tragic period in Chinese modern Chinese history, unfortunately, under the communist Chinese rule, and they wanted to get rid of the 4 olds from memory. So it was the old habits, old thoughts, old traditions, and so forth. So the old spiritual practices wouldn't be tolerated. They used to call it spiritual cultivation back then. They used to have names like, they had overtones of spiritual characteristics, and they wouldn't have been tolerated during this period of time. So how could they transmit their practice? And they were faced with this question, and out of this question came the answer that we're going to call these practices Qigong. So that's the origin of that terminology, and I'm forgetting where I was going with that, but okay, so the Chinese Research Society was working with Falun Dafa, and they were publishing books, and there came a period of time where the Chinese Communist Party decided that they could profit from charging people to attend or learn the practice, and they could also profit by also charging for the books and the materials above what it would cost to print these materials, of course, which is how Falun Gong is spreading today. It's all free, and it's all the books and all the teachings are available online for free. And if you want to buy a copy of the book, it's basically the cost of the book plus publishing costs and staffing costs with I don't think there's very much profit in it at all, and that's how it's meant to be. It's supposed to be accessible, and that's the idea. As soon as you start charging a fee, you are at some level restricting access to a portion of society. The founder, from my understanding, wasn't going to allow that to happen, and that was probably the first thing that upset the Chinese Communist Party when they refused to charge to learn the practice. So fast forward to 1999, and this is the year that the persecution begins. There's about 100 million people in China learning, which is absolutely extraordinary. And I've done a little bit of rudimentary math thinking about this in terms of the population of the country during this period of time, which I believe was about 1.2 billion people. And you've got 100 million people learning. So, we're sort of talking about 1 in 12. All right, if my maths is right, we're talking about 1 in 12 people. So, we're talking considerably large numbers that have adopted the value system of this practice and the principles and the guiding principles. Obviously, we talked about at the opening of the show, which are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And now they're the English version of the 3 Chinese words, which is Zhen, Shan, and Ren. And Zhen doesn't just mean truthfulness, it's truth, it's always being a true person, to be true, and all these sorts of connotations, or these ideas stem from that word. And Shan is compassion and kindness and goodness, and Ren is tolerance, endurance, and forbearance. And so it's all these qualities, but in the simple English, like we're used to, we have one word means one thing. But in Chinese, it's very different. A Chinese word or a character can have a deeper set of meanings, of many meanings. So that's an idea of those characteristics, and what was adopted by the Chinese people in such large numbers. And now you'd think, hey, isn't that a good thing? This is great. And you've got 1 in 12 people in a country that are going to actually actively practice these values and take these values into their workplaces. They're going to take these values into their family lives, to their interactions with the public and the community, and be more generous and giving of themselves, and more tolerant, and obviously not steal and not cheat, and endure when people do wrong by you, and all these things. You'd think that these would be good things, and that certainly the exercise component too was also bringing health, which was quantified in a report which was run by one of the state agencies. I think it was a sports agency in China, which documented a series of health benefits and quantified an actual figure in Chinese yuan. They were saving the state just by actually getting up and participating in this everyday exercise. So very interesting, very obvious, the positive impacts that such a practice being these many people that are taking part of in a daily basis would have on such a society. But that became a problem, and this is my understanding from what I have heard, that inside the Politburo you would have, in the Chinese communist system, the way it's set up, you'll have different heads for the different industries, military and so forth, that represent and speak for those industries. They form the Politburo, And at the head of that would sit the party secretary, Jiang Zemin. Some of those were Falun Dafa practitioners. And also Jiang Zemin's wife was said to have been introduced the practice as well to her. And I'm not sure if she was practicing at home or not. But I think this was a blow to Jiang Zemin's perceived and actual ultimate, or perceived power. He was actually the most powerful man in the country, but here we have a practice, and the practice obviously has a founder as well, who is being adored by over 100 million people, obviously, and getting these glowing reports and all these benefits are happening in society, and there's this big change. He's affecting change in this country that's controlled by communism, and this country that's supposed to be controlled from the communist structure and not influenced by anything that's not controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. They like to control everything. Many people might not know this, but over in China, you have to have in a church, in a Christian church, you would have to have a big picture of Xi Jinping in there at the moment. And before dinner, you would have to thank the Communist Party first, and all these sorts of things. And they alter the Bible, and there's a big control mechanism that comes along with the communist system, and it's reeks of insecurity, of being scared of individuality and letting people have freedoms and things like that. Everything's tightly controlled, and you can go into social credit system and all that, but that's a discussion for another day. So here we have Jiang Zemin. Now, Jiang Zemin issued 3 famous directives when he decided that Falun Gong was getting too big and was a challenge to his hegemony and his grip on total power and control. So he issued 3 orders. And now I've got these here, and I want to be accurate. So his instructions to the Politburo was to defame the reputations. There's 3 orders against Falun Gong. So defame their reputations, bankrupt them financially, and destroy them physically. Okay, not a very compassionate guy, but maybe you can sort of accept that this person said those things when you understand how he rose in the ranks of the Communist Party to begin with. So he wants to destroy them physically, bankrupt them financially, and ruin their reputations. Okay, so this is the directive that he sent out, and when an order comes out from the top of the Communist Party, then everyone has to act. Everyone gets in line, following the orders. The cogs start turning. They start pushing out things in the media. They start shaping a narrative, whatever they have to do, bribe people, pay people to get the smear campaign going, and so forth. So this is what happened in 1999, and that was 23 years ago. Here we are today. Jiang Zemin is now not in the picture any longer as far as being the head of the Communist Party, although he does hold considerable power, and there's an internal power struggle still going on between his faction, people that he still has in the system, and Xi Jinping. That aside, 23 years later, this persecution still continues. I don't know why Xi hasn't decided to call an end to this. It could lie somewhere in the premise that the Communist Party can never be wrong. So by ending this would be a blow to the ideology of this political control system, and it's one that they're not prepared a blow not prepared to take, or they can't admit sort of any faults on their behalf. For whatever reason, I'm not sure if that's perceived weakness, and then everything else can be challenged, but they have to rule with certainty and power, and totalitarian sort of style control. So I do have a couple of articles here today, just to sort of have a little bit more in-depth analysis into the time period and what happened through a couple of what I would say authoritative sources. And the reason I qualify the Mingwei website as an authoritative source is because this is a source that is compiled by practitioners themselves. You could say, well, that could have a bias to it, and you say, well, yes, that of course that could be possible, that there would be a bias. It'd be very hard to remove all biases. I think they're very careful at doing that very well, and there's no other agency or group inside of China that is documenting the abductions, the tortures, the imprisonments, the deaths, the persecution on a daily basis. They have daily reports about what is happening at the provincial level, all the way up to in the small counties, or up to the state and the nation as a whole. But you hear about things from all over China. This is not, I have to say too, this isn't, their reporting style isn't one where they try to exaggerate for effect. I've seen the numbers on their website, they are considerably low, very, very low, to be to the point where I don't think they're anywhere near what the real numbers of deaths are. And they do this because they only list confirmed deaths. Okay, so confirmed deaths through the persecution. And it's very hard sometimes to gather the name and the person who died and get a confirmation of a death when they cremate bodies. There's often no evidence there, and there's people just disappear, and you never heard of them again. So they just post confirmed deaths. Okay, so the website for address for the Mingwei website is well, I speak English obviously, so I would put in en.minghui.org, and if you were to type that in, or type it into a search engine, Mingwei, and you will find it as well, but it's en.minghui.org. And if you were to type that in today, you would be brought up with a front page that says about DAFA along the top. Next is cultivation, persecution, news and events, perspective, culture, karma and virtue, and reference. I do like reading culture, karma and virtue as well. Those two have some amazing stories in there from the 5,000 years of civilization and rich culture that has been born through that time period in China, and stories of Taoists and Buddhists and so forth. It's a wealth of just beauty and culture there. But back to the persecution. So this main site, as I'm looking at it, just below that you have read today's articles, where they normally have 3 or 4 articles that will scroll by. At the moment there's a notice from the editorial board, and there's a picture of some bamboo. You have the founder of Falun Dafa on the right hand side, who's quietly meditating on a mountain top, very on the side of a mountain, very peacefully. You have some recent articles underneath that, some editorial notices, but the main page, the body of that website, at the bottom at the moment you have three main stories. One is titled San Francisco Parade and Rally Mark 23 Years of Persecution. So it says, here's a little small paragraph, I'll just read each of these 3. So it says, a passerby who were stunned to read the banners about forced organ harvesting, said the CCP's removal of organs from Falun Gong practitioners and selling them from huge profits is appalling. How can it treat its people like this? This is beyond the bottom line of human morality, and indeed it is. The second is from here, which is my hometown of Sydney, and this is an international site, so go Sydney. They're out there raising awareness, and the headline for this one is Sydney resident, justice will be upheld in the end. I believe so too. And the paragraph below it reads, as Falun Dafa practitioners collected signatures on a petition calling for an end to the 23 years of persecution, a passerby remarked, your peaceful protests are very important. It helps to spread the truth in democratic countries and exert pressure on the regime to end this persecution. And then the next story they have highlighted here is titled Hong Kong. Numerous candlelight vigils held to mourn Falun Dafa practitioners who died as a result of persecution. And their paragraph below reads, in order to accommodate Hong Kong's COVID restrictions, practitioners held multiple small-scale candlelight vigils to mourn practitioners in China who died in the persecution of Falun Gong. Taiwan, just on a side note, do an amazing job at doing these large-scale formations where they have practitioners all sit together in a coordinated fashion, and they get an aerial shot, and they'll make these beautiful pictures, very intricate in a lot of times, and they have candles and different colors, and they can make these amazing, huge scale scenes. It's incredible, and you should find them on this website too. They're absolutely amazing. But you keep going down, the event has latest articles from each of those above categories that I read before. On the culture, I'll just give you an idea. Let's see, what have they got here? Blessed by the Divine is one, ancient legends and modern day stories. So that might be one I'm going to read later on. That sounds pretty interesting. Karma and Virtue. Let's see, what have they got here? Miracles in my niece's family. Blessed by Dafa's master for striving to be a good person. The Falun Dafa brings blessings to my neighbours and so forth. So there's some interesting stories there. In this perspective, there's some interesting ones as well. We keep going down. We've got focused topics. So you can learn more about persecution, about Jiang Zemin and his role, peaceful appeals, some of the propaganda that was put out by the Chinese Communist Party to try and sway public opinion, because of course, if you want to launch a large-scale national sort of suppression of a group or target a group for attack or suppression, you can't throw the public as a whole offside. So this has always been a way of dictators and totalitarian systems, communist systems, is to have propaganda, and I'm sure it's in the West as well. I'm under no disillusion of that, but propaganda is very powerful to control a narrative and basically and sway public opinion so that they don't revolt against you when you crack down on a group. So you've got that down there. There's also questions like World Falun Dafa Day. That's the day it was Falun Dafa was brought to the public. It was I believe May 13th, 1992. We have what's called a evading lion, to learn about Falun Dafa, some more information about the persecution. So we've listed here 4,828 persecuted deaths confirmed. And that's the big word there, confirmed. And I think that speaks to the veracity of those deaths because the number is considerably larger than that. The very next to the left subtopic that I'm looking at here is titled Organ Harvesting Atrocities. Based on that alone, just the organ harvesting, not deaths in custody, not tortured to death sort of deaths, just organ harvesting is probably the biggest killer in the Falun Dafa and other minority groups or political dissidents in communist China today. So a lot of practitioners, when they are detained, especially in the early days, if they were detained by the authorities, a lot of the time they wouldn't give up their name and who they were, because they knew that that would be used against their family members, and then pressure would come down from the bosses, the companies they worked at, or they'll lose business, or they'll get intimidated, they get knocks on the door from the police, and the family members would turn on them, and for the hardships that they'd have to face and the harassment they'd have to face. And a lot of the time they didn't want that to happen, and for this impact to this negative impact to happen. So they would just say, I'm not going to say my name. And that was the perfect setup for organ harvesting in China. So you now have over 100 million people that are getting detained constantly, probably on a daily basis all over the country. They're going into the prison system. They're not giving names. They're John Does or Jane Does, and when they come in, they get blood tested and they get their general health checkups. They take place. And the thing about Falun Dafa practitioners is that they typically don't drink or smoke, and they do exercises every day, and they're very healthy. So they become a prime source, a prospect to have their organs forcefully removed in this state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting, which has been proven beyond a doubt. Most recently at The Hague, I think it was so last year or the year before, it was concluded by Sir Jeffrey Nice that beyond a doubt this in fact is happening, and it's happening on a large scale, and it is happening at the behest of the communist state. So we're in no disillusion here. This is a crime. It is taking place, and it's taking place on a large scale. And so what would happen would be that somebody would need a organ of some sort. You would then find that a search would take place in a database where all these people's these poor detained citizens would have their details entered into. One blood type and match would be found, and then that person would get a knock on a cell door, and then they would disappear and never be seen again. And it's tragic. And what makes this even more tragic is one, they do this while their patient is alive, and that helps with the organ's chance of surviving the transplant process. And so that's one tragic part of it. It's an incredible atrocity in itself, but Western countries and other countries often don't realise it, but their health insurance companies, when they pay for an organ transplant to take place in China, that's usually where your organs are coming from. So you can get a very short turnaround for an organ. If you need one, if it doesn't work out, you can get another one very, very quick. So, I mean, it's quite obvious. It's murder on demand for your organs. That's what's going on. That's what's happening. And that's why that number of 4,828 is extremely low, because this has been going on since 1999. And now there's a whole other side in the Xinjiang region, where you have the Muslim Uyghurs. There's 1 to 3 million in re-education camps, and they have what looks like hospital facilities now built up there, and they have little flight runways, and I'm sure the reports are fairly accurate that are claiming that this is going on, and they're going through the same testing procedures, checking their corneas and their blood tests and so forth. So look, this thing hasn't stopped with Falun Gong. It's now spread and will continue to spread until pressure is mounted against the people perpetrating these crimes. Okay, people need to speak up. We need to be aware of what's going on. And so that's why those numbers are extremely low. It's estimated during the that Hague inquiry on forced organ harvesting in China that it's $1 billion industry. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Okay, every year, $1 billion. Anyway, Falun Dafa's story can be found on this website as well. Okay, so it's very good. It's a very good publishing website. I highly recommend it. Another place to go if you wanted to go for like a third party sort of information about what's going on, particularly a name recognised in the Western world, would be Amnesty International. They've done a great job at documenting also the crimes against humanity that are taking place in regards to this persecution against Falun Gong. I have just from another website that I'll mention, faluninfo.net, which is spelled faluninfo.net. That website has a little write-up about Amnesty International, and they say that they first began researching and reporting on the persecution in the days immediately following the ban on the practice on July 20th, 1999. And since that time, the abuses against Falun Gong practitioners have been a regular feature of the China section of their annual report. That's Amnesty International's annual report, and their actions have helped free or lessen the persecution, which is a big thanks to, and what an amazing effort by that wonderful organisation there. They have also produced a report, special report on torture in 2001. They highlighted the systematic use of torture by security agents in a nationwide effort to force citizens to abandon the traditional Chinese practice. Okay. It talks about what happened during the Olympic Games in 2008, and lists the reports, and they've got a whole list of the categorizing ancient roots of China and the rise of popularity of Falun Gong, even the persecution, terror unleashed, and so they actually go into documenting sort of what I'm talking about here. So you can see that this is a recognized issue, and it's not being appreciated, I think, by the general person. I mean, we're all busy, we all have so much going on in our own issues in life, and all over the world there are tragedies occurring, and I think it's very important that we try to make time to try and understand that these things are going on, and maybe sign a petition, or maybe post something on our social media, and just raise awareness in general, because while those things don't seem that important, I think once we can all understand what is happening, then we can make little conscious decisions about where we spend our money, about what we support, about who we, associate with. It's where we spend our time and efforts, So I think these are important websites to know about. These are important issues to know about, and that's brings us to what this day is all about, and it's about raising awareness, and that's why I've done this video. So I don't know if I want to go into too much detail about Jiang Zemin's beginning this persecution. If I haven't already said it, I did have trouble with the video halfway through, and I lost power. So I kept on talking without realizing I wasn't recording, but I did want to just, in case it didn't get recorded, mention the directives mentioned by Jiang Zemin. And I want to make sure I get it correctly, which is why I'm looking for it here. But so Jiang Zemin ordered Falun Gong practitioners. The officials had to defame their reputations, bankrupt them financially, and destroy them physically. Okay, so this is what's happened since 1999. There's some very good articles that you'll find on the Mingwei website, and you can read up about it on Amnesty International if you want some more information there. It's all very good. I did come across an interesting article on Mingwei, which I think I'll just just touch on, because it does show you that when you raise awareness, there is an effect, okay? And such an effect happened over in Argentina when a federal judge ordered the arrest of Jiang Zemin and Lu Gan, who was instrumental also in the persecution. I think he was like his right-hand man sort of thing. But it says here, after a 4-year investigation, Judge Octavio Arroez de La Madrid, and I apologize if I've got that wrong. So he was on the Argentinian Federal Court number 9, and he made a historic decision on December 17th, 2009, and issued arrest warrants for the former leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Jiang Zemin, and Lu Gan, who was the former head of the 610 office. So, and that was for their role in persecuting Falun Gong. So they were charged with, and now remember they are officials, so even though they hold these positions, they're officials, they can be held accountable, just like anyone can, for crimes against humanity, and that's exactly what they were charged with. So he ordered the Interpol Department of the Federal Police of Argentina to carry out the arrest. So you see, this isn't all for nothing. Raising the awareness, having people understand what's going on. There are good people out there, good judges out there, there are good lawyers out there, there are good organizations still out there that are concerned about the well-being of others, the law being upheld, the sanctity of life, and all these crimes that are taking place are not going to go without being met with justice at some point. And I think it's once we reach a sort of certain number of people that are aware and sort of speak up or demand justice or speak out about what's happening is when we'll see that happen. Because a lot of the time the climate has a big impact on how things play out, right? So if people just turn a blind eye and say, oh well, it doesn't affect me or it doesn't matter, and no one really cares about it, then there's no incentive, unfortunately, for I suppose things to take, real things to change and change to happen. So I think that's our individual responsibility for all those out there that are going through these sorts of these sufferings. It's just let's be human. Let's let our compassion out. Let's show our kindness, and let's support those who are willing to stand up and prosecute the persecutors. So that's really what we want to do. We want to try and bring an end to this and stop the suffering of so many people that right now are over there in China, and the persecution that follows them abroad. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've tried to cover this in a bit of detail. I can go in much more detail, of course, but I am wary that the video can't go too long. I don't want to lose you as my valued audience. So and anyone that's a first timer here on the show, I welcome you. Thank you. In the future, I'm going to be continue to document and bring stories of interest about the Falun Gong spiritual practice, the practitioners, maybe things from the culture, and just interesting, uplifting articles, and positive things, and just try and make some content like that you can enjoy and hopefully have a positive impact on you and your week and your day. And my co-host Abby would hope be joining me on season 2. Hopefully he has the time to also assist and give his perspective, and he brings a great deal to this program as well. We're both new to doing this video production, and you can see from season 1 to season 2 we're taking a different format, and I hope you enjoy the change and hopefully just keep on improving. So thanks very much for your time, and I'll just ask that maybe tonight on this occasion when you watch this video, if it's not the 20th, we just give a thought no matter your spiritual leanings, if any at all, let's just, for the betterment of humanity, try to just maybe have a quiet thought or have a prayer tonight before we go to bed. Just a few words, just to try and bring an end to this persecution of Falun Gong and end the suffering of innocent people. End the suffering of innocent people. And bless you all, and thank you for your time. And I'll see you next week, or whenever I get a chance. Hopefully soon. Hopefully will be next week for our second episode on season 2, on the journey home. Thank you.